Well, hello, everybody. We are back again. With me, I have Kathy Beale, professional Aquarian. This video will also be on her YouTube channel as well, which is Professional Aquarian. So please go and give her a subscribe as well. And Andrew Bassano Brewer on Facebook, or he has a website that you can find on his Facebook. Unless you want to give people the link, Andy.
Oh, it's just andrew-brewer.com. That's me.
Yeah. Okay, so we'd love it if you'd follow us elsewhere as well. I've got a Facebook page, Cosmic Owl Astrology, and also I'm on Substack. And Kathy, where else are you mainly? So,
My website is empowermentunlimited.net. I have a Facebook page, Empowerment Unlimited. I have a Facebook group, the Astro Insight Lounge, where we talk about events in the news that play out the energies of the aspects. And I have a
yeah,
Patreon,
yeah.
patreon.com/Kathy Beale.
My website is louiseedington.com, and I have a membership community too. So, if you guys feel called, we all do have an active practice. So anyway, we've got a lot to talk about. We said this weekend would be huge. And I realized that, because our audience is mainly US based, you might be going, well, nothing seems to be happening, but it's all happening elsewhere. So, there's a few things happening. There's obviously Georgia is fighting back, the country of Georgia. That's kind of got a revolution happening. There's the Syrian rebels. There's the Romanian election has been annulled, and they're going to restart again because fraud was found. And there was the rapid overturning of martial law in South Korea, and that guy's supposed to be being impeached, the one who claimed martial law. Then in the US, we do have the killing of the UHC, the United Healthcare CEO, and I think it's all connected. The people are getting sick of this, and the rule of the wealthy, the oligarchs, the autocrats. It's all connected. So I just wanted to kind of give an overview that the news is coming out, and you kind of have to spread the web wider at the moment to see what's happening. You post shared an article, Kathy, didn't you, that about something where the US had initiated something that happened somewhere else. I can't remember which article that was.
Oh, the US is asking TikTok for information about the Romanian election. And if I will just add to the list that you have there, vote of no confidence in France. French government has to reconfigure. A lot has happened this week.
It really has. It's kind of hard to keep up with it. I'm sure there's more too. So, so we are kind of stripping it down and trying to make it easier for you to see and understand, especially because we have such new viewers who are not astrologers. So we are going to we've created PDFs of some charts that we're going to share, and we'll dive straight in with Nato's chart. But you had a timeline or something you wanted
Well,
to
there are just a few things I want to put as the framework for the outset. All right.
Yeah.
This long weekend, we're recording this on December 6th. I'm going to back it up a couple of days and going into Sunday or Monday. We have what I've been calling a cluster bomb of influences, and they combine sudden clarity, something saying stop, something saying not so fast, something saying do over, instances of collective power being claimed, huge amounts of money being revealed affecting the collective. There's also an article about an unthinkable amount of money that Musk put into getting Trump elected, and
Oh,
deceit being exposed. All right, so that's just this weekend. And then as we get into next week, by the end of next week, there will be revelations, there will be things that have been discovered, there'll be news of investigations, possibly, and then going deeper into them or taking action on them and shifting the narrative. So that's next week. Clouds parting, fog lifting, shifting the narrative, something that people believe to be one way being shown to be another way. That's the translation of the astrology that we're under through the middle of December.
It's nuts.
Yeah, and I've consistently said right from the beginning that there would be revelations that would happen in the EU that would circle back and have an impact. And even when we did our show on Monday, I said to expect things in Eastern Europe when things are starting to heat up. All these players are interconnected, which is why I think that the chart for NATO is so integral to the way in which we look at things. Just because we think that everything is Trump-centric or the US-centric, it's not. What's happening in the EU, what's happening in other parts of the world has a direct impact. And the information that's coming out about the election in Romania, about the way in which that's being influenced, about the ways in which money is being moved around, who's trying to influence who. The EU, NATO has a lot at stake here. And that information can be shared, which goes back thematically to something we have said, and certainly I have said, for a long, long time. This game's not over, and it's not strictly being driven by Trump and people within the United States. They have aligned themselves with players on the world stage, and those players on the world stage have competing interests. And that's why today is going to be really fascinating. I think for me, just to look at it, is to look at how those major players are going to be impacted by the NATO is a thing. It has a power. It has a collective energy. It has a chart. It has things that it needs and it wants. And I believe all those things are going to circle back and impact Trump, who to me is small potatoes in the whole grand scheme of things. So people in the United States, I know you're feeling somewhat down on things, but there are still lots of factors happening all across the world that potentially can circle back and impact what happens in this election. And what a few rich people want does not mean that that's the way it's going to play out. So as I say all the time, it's game on, baby. Get the popcorn ready. There's a lot that's going to happen, and it may surprise people. And I think today is going to be a fun show when we all three dive into that.
I agree. So before I share just the first chart we're going to dive into, I have to show you the card I pulled this morning, Queen of Swords with the Thoth Tarot. I always think of this as chopping the head off the patriarchy. I always think of this card like that. So I still maintain that, the oligarchs, patriarchy, autocrats, whatever you call them, are not going to win out. So anyway, but we've got a long way to go. All right, so I am going to share the first chart. We decided just to look at Nato's chart alone, and I got comments that people like that I point at things, so I'm probably going to do even better this time and draw lines to things that are being talked about to help people see what's happening. So, well, the first thing I notice is that we're using an 11:15 a.m. time that somebody in the comments gave to us. The times for when an organization starts are always kind of under debate with in mundane astrology, which is astrology of events. But this time seems to fit really well with what's happening, right, Kathy? So anyway, Mercury stationed retrograde, exactly opposing the moon in the NATO chart. So the moon's at 22 Gemini, and we just had the Mercury Cazimi, and NATO are clearly involved. So that's where I'll start. You dive in as well, everybody.
Mercury Cazimi is when the sun and Mercury basically fuse, and that brings a moment of incredible clarity.
And that was at 14 Sagittarius. So,
and that clarity in this instance has Mercury being retrograde. So there's something about information, processes, research, things that have been going on since Mercury went retrograde on November 25th that plays into the clarity that has just happened.
I just wanted to add that the moon is generally seen as the people in mundane astrology too. So anyway, just carry on, Kathy.
Right. No, and you've drawn this triangle is called a grand trine. It is an unbroken flow of energy, and actually it's grounded in idealism. There's a planet that's monkey in the middle, down at the bottom in the fourth house, Neptune in uh, Libra, which has to do with agreements and alliances. So there's actually a spiritual underpinning or a higher underpinning to all of this fieriness, to this, we're going to put our combined power behind whatever is happening out in the world right now. It's not just willy-nilly, and it is a defense organization. It doesn't go picking fights. It waits, and then it decides to step in to protect the interest of its members.
And there, that Neptune in Libra is what I'd say very idealistic. So, yeah, and it's like the dream of community together, if you like. In the fourth house, the basis of security. So, Andy,
and it ties. I'm so sorry. It ties to the Saturn in the U.S. chart. So, and Saturn tends to be glue when there are Saturn contacts, and we'll see this later. But the U.S. is an integral part of this.
Yeah, very much.
Regardless of what somebody else might be saying.
Yes, definitely.
All right, I'm going to shut up. Andy, you've got things to say.
Well, no, I mean, the thing that jumps out is that so many things are happening at 13 in cardinal signs. You've got Neptune down here in opposition to the Sun and Venus and Mars, and then that's going to square the natal Sun for the Sibley chart. The thing that's interesting to me when I look at all these planets is Mercury, because Mercury seems just a little bit sort of off to the side. To me, it's like the run of the litter. So Mercury up here in the 10th, you have really powerful ways of trying to present themselves to the world. And I think that the way that NATO asserts her power over the next 60 days is going to have a huge impact on the way that the United States presents itself to the world too. To some degree, I think that what's happening is a battle for supremacy and whose personality is the dominant personality. I think that when Mars goes retrograde here on the U.S. chart on the North Node later today, to some degree, I think that's an identity crisis for the United States. Their swag is going to be tested. And so all these things happening at 13, 14, Libra, Cancer, Aries, they're trying to figure it all out. And I think that it's going to get wild, I think. And Neptune down there in the fourth, there's a philosophy that's behind NATO, but it still has to assert this very martial kind of energy. All those things in Aries up at the top of the chart, it's going to clash. The United States and NATO, I think, are going to clash, and I think that is what circles back to kind of bite Trump in the butt a little bit. So I'm kind of fascinated by this chart with NATO. It's really, really interesting in comparison to all the major players here and to the United States as a collective entity. So so that's what I think about that. But all these planets in Aries up at the top of the chart, that's the thing, man. It's power, but it's power in contravention of kind of its birth pains coming out of World War II, right after World War II. That is part of NATO's collective identity, and I think it's trying to assert a new way of being seen. I think it's trying to assert its dominance, and I think so many variables are likely to shift over the next 30 to 60 days. I still maintain that this gets really super interesting in ways that are very surprising and happen in a hurry. So that's
I
my
agree.
take on it.
Oh, I agree, Andy. I know people would love us to say, well, this is how it's going to be and how it's going to end up, but there's so many twists and turns. Andy mentioned that Mercury, which is the voice communication, and of course, Mars is stationing retrograde today in aspect to that Mercury, and Mars will station direct later. I can't remember the date. Can you, Kathy? On the ascendant of NATO. So this chart is really lit up, and Venus and Ceres are exactly conjunct on the Jupiter today as well, before they slip into Aquarius and join Pluto to be at the, all three will be at the 0 degree of Aquarius. This is kind of a big shift in values, because Venus is very much values, kind of grief, and forgiveness and loss about kind of what's happening right now. That's how Venus series feels, and about how the patriarchy, for want of a better word, has taken away our personal sense of empowerment. But when it gets to that 0 Aquarius degree overnight, and they're all there tomorrow, people are rising up. They're going, huh, no, this is not going to happen. And I think NATO's connected to that by going, this is the end of acting this way. We're going to be more Aquarian in future. Because 29 Capricorn is a very powerful degree, and especially in the house of open enemies for NATO. So,
And Louise, don't you think it's really interesting that Pluto has been parked on NATO's Jupiter up until just recently when it moved into Aquarius? So that has to have an impact. I mean, Jupiter there, in terms of its expansion, NATO's in, again, a bit of a, they may align with different people. We tend to think the United States dictates, international relations, but other people could be sick of the United States because they can't trust them. And there could be new alliances that are forming now that we see all these things moving into 0 Aquarius. That's,
yeah.
I still think it's just going to get wild as can be.
I see something else in that.
Mm.
Hybrid war. I see the Pluto and Aquarius bit being attacking telecommunication systems, attacking
For sure.
information cables.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that this is going to move much more into bringing the information warfare into part of what NATO goes against. And to that end, Louise has already
Elon Musk.
Louise has already drawn a line from NATO's Mercury in Aries. It is in a trine or an unbroken flow of energy to Mars, stationing retrograde in its first house. So like really going back and figuring out what it is and what it's going to do. On the 15th, the Mercury will station direct on the full moon. Mercury will station direct in NATO's is it in the 5th house, right? At 6 degrees Sagittarius. So there will be a really tight grand trine of energy flowing from Mercury retrograde and what it has uncovered already, and Mars stationing retrograde, like, now what do we go do about it? And trining power up a round robin of energy with NATO's Mercury in Aries, which is both, we're going to make really bold statements, but also, and I said this last time, things flying through the air. So, there could really be
or
and
the
it
drone.
conjuncts NATO's Chiron.
So there could be
NATO's Chiron is 8 Sag.
But there'll be drones and planes and things like that. This is very different too. For those that are like, oh my God, we're going into World War III. I think, as I've said before, I think we really already are. But, all these aspects to NATO's chart, I think Andrew's really correct, is that NATO's almost like redefining itself, and kind of, and the new head of NATO, Mark Rutte, is a big part of that. of like, okay, how are we actually going to kind of step up and defend the West, for want of a better word, democracy, everything, you know.
There are two going forward things already apparent in this. And the first is, as Mars goes retrograde, it's going to go back to the NATO ascendant, and it will be hanging out at 17 degrees Cancer from February 12th to March 9th. It stations direct, it turns around on February 23rd. So there may be we'll go back and do things some of the old way and then suddenly doing something different. That'll be something to watch. The other thing that interlocks with that is that there is a solar eclipse at the end of March after this, after Mars is moving forward and NATO is moving into, okay, this is what we're going to do to be protective. There's a solar eclipse exactly on NATO's Mars Venus conjunction in the 10th house. So that's shooting forward in a huge way, and acting on realignments that have been going on for the past 2 years. They could be admitting, I mean, maybe Ukraine gets admitted. I don't know, but there's something really, really big and
Well,
future oriented.
they've been rumbling about Ukraine going in, I think, haven't they? So yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. You know, it's like, who else can we kind of draw in really to defend what needs defending? It feels like. Yeah. Would you agree?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got Sweden and Finland. I mean, so you've got, to some degree, I think what the Russian Federation is trying to do is to go back and recreate the Soviet Union. That's why I think that what's happening in Romania is a big thing. In Poland, they expelled some of the Russian diplomats. That just happened this week as well. There's everything that's happening in Ukraine. So all those old Eastern European bloc countries, and Finland used to be part of Russia at one point back prior to 1917. If strategically NATO can move its places to launch missiles closer to Russia, then that puts a lot of potential pressure on Russia. So how things are maneuvered, we tend to also forget that how things are shipped. That's why the Baltic is so important to Russia. That's why the Black Sea is so important to Russia, and why they're doing a lot of the things they're doing in Ukraine. It's not all just AI and Chat GPT. People need boats. They need to have access to ports. All these things are coming into play, and that's why that no matter what's happening in the United States, and I realize that Americans are very focused on Trump and what he could do and his whole, the rhetoric of what might happen. There's still a lot of players on the world stage that could throw a monkey wrench into this. And I think that, again, we've said this, all three of us, for the last few weeks. I believe that when Mars goes retrograde, and that's today, that things start really getting revved up. And that is going to have a gigantic, I personally believe that's going to have a gigantic impact. And that's why I think that the timelines that we have, baseline expectations, I believe, are going to be blown up as a result of that. There's a lot happening. So yeah, for sure.
I would just add that I actually have read that Putin kind of thinks he's the reincarnation of Peter the Great. He wants the Russian Empire, not just the Soviet Union, and he wants to expand it as well. But anyway, either way, it's huge. So anything else to add, Kathy, before we drive in? I feel like I interrupted your flow, and I apologize.
Oh, no. This is, I think that we're fine.
Yeah. So shall we move on to NATO with Putin?
Yes.
For now? Yeah. Oh, hang on. I need to just get my cursor right. Okay. All right.
What do you think of his sun at 13 Libra, and how that ties into opposing all those planets in Aries and parked right on the Neptune? I mean, that just jumps out right from the get-go.
Well, they're from the beginning, they're naturally opposed. They're just opposed.
Yeah, they are. And his Uranus is on the ascendant of NATO, which, he will rebel against that kind of.
The disruptor and the instigator.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
The destabilizer. That's a good way to put it. The destabilizer.
Yes, which is, it's becoming clearer and clearer that he has been doing. Despite the left in the US being gaslit that Russia Gate was not a thing, it really was a thing. So
Andy, what do you think about that opposition?
I mean, I think they're at odds with one another. I mean, that's a simplistic way to put it. And I think that NATO is bigger than Putin,
well,
which
so
may go against what most people think.
Oh, I think NATO's way bigger than Putin, to be honest. I think.
The other thing that jumps out to me, how comfortable do you two feel with this birth time? Do you think that this time is pretty close to the truth for Putin?
Well, we're not even sure. I've been following a lot of astrologers talking about Putin for a long time. A lot of astrologers don't think the year is even right. So, but it's the most commonly used one. And by putting NATO in the middle, we're not looking at his ascendant and the birth time and things. So, it's not quite so important the time when he's used in the outer ring. So, because this is based on NATO's ascendant. So, no, we're not sure of his time, but this is the most commonly used chart. So.
The reason I asked that, and this goes back to the way that I look at astrology in terms of reincarnation. If this time is true, and you've got Pluto at 22 Leo parked on the midhaven, this is a dude that is born to power, who believes he deserves power. And I think that there is a truth to that for him as a kind of a generating force. The other thing that would jump out in his chart, I think, is again, if this time is correct, is Venus. Because I think that one of the things that to me jumps out with Putin is that he's got a lot of enemies, and you can only have so many enemies so long. And if things don't go well, and this goes back to something I said prior to the invasion of Ukraine, if things don't go successfully for Putin, those enemies are circling the wagons against him. So I think that that is also part of the dynamic that we're likely to see play out. But Putin is a dude that is born to be a dominant force. He's a top dog kind of dude astrologically. And the rest of the people, Trump, Musk, and all the rest of them, do not have that same kind of energy. So Putin is a dangerous kind of character in ways the rest of them aren't. And so as they try to interact with him and think that everything is on an even playing field, it's not. That's why I think that there's still lots of things behind the scenes that may come back to bite Trump in the butt, because he's aligned himself with people that he's not strong enough to really do business with. So, yeah, Putin is a challenging character for sure.
And he's clever and smart. I mean, he was in the KGB for heaven's sake. So yeah, go on, Kathy.
Well, that Pluto and that Venus both speak to dealing with secrets and the psyop,
sure.
knowing how to play people and using money and sex. Venus in Scorpio, knowing how to manipulate people, knowing how to get what they want/need. And if this time is accurate, his moon, which is his emotional driver, is on the US Mars. So,
yeah,
it gets into it with us. There's like he's fixated on us. And that also ties him to Trump, that moon.
It does.
And the moon being in the 8th there, with being an almost exact quincunx with a 3-degree Scorpio ascendant. Again, if this time is correct, this is a dude that works behind the scenes, trusts no one, and no one should trust him. And that's why I think that NATO's chart is so instructive about what we might expect over the next few months, because Putin is now impacting what's happening in NATO, and NATO is not having it. And that's why the interaction between these two charts, to me, I think is so significant. And I'm really super curious how you two see it as well. But Kathy,
Well,
what do you think of that quincunx here with the moon and the eighth and the Scorpio ascendant? To me, that just screams, like secrecy and double
oh,
dealings and like James Bond kind of stuff.
Yeah, and playing people against each other with the mutability of the moon in Gemini. And also, it would make him, if you were dealing with him, first off, the ascendant, poker face, having no idea what's really going on, and
For sure.
A Gemini moon could be easygoing,
Two-faced.
like, well, that
slippery.
too, but lightening it, like people not quite seeing. I know someone who's a Scorpio sun with a Gemini moon who laughs and laughs and laughs. I still wouldn't trust her. But this could be part of what causes him to disarm people.
And
Yeah.
he's got Venus in the first there in Scorpio. I mean, that's a kind of a seductive kind of energy. Again, this is not a person you trust. And what's interesting is I think that his dynamic is very similar to Trump's, but Trump's in over his head. Trump does those same kinds of things. You can see the way he plays people off one another, trying to get them, off center so that they'll do his bidding. But Trump's an amateur compared to Putin, and it's going to. But going back to NATO has a life and death self-interest, and they are not just going to go along with what Putin wants, what Trump wants. That's why I still maintain that there are lots of unexpected twists and turns likely to happen. And if we're speaking the truth here, we should see lots of news coming out of Europe over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And if we're
We
wrong, that's not going to happen. But if we're on the
already
right
are,
page
but
here, right,
yeah,
it's already happening. Things that we talked about a month ago,
it's gonna
but
be a
we
lot
should
more.
see that escalate. It should get dramatically bigger, and it should be happening faster and faster and faster. And that news should begin to circle back within the intelligence community and the military community within the United States. All those things are interlinked, and that's why it's just, popcorn is on.
December
For
15 is a
sure.
really hot day for that, everyone. Okay. December 15 is a really, now I'm not saying, oh, all of the big news is going to break on that day, but what Andy has been talking about should escalate and something really dramatic should come to a head by the 15th.
Yeah. And just one last thing, I find it fascinating that his son is on the Neptune of NATO. I kind
So
of
do I.
think, and in the fourth house, I kind of think NATO as an organization has his number. They kind of see who he is behind that thing. They understand him really personally. Anyway.
And I think that that's a big deal, Louise, don't you? I mean, the fact that they have a way of
Yeah.
formulating an action plan. If you understand the root cause, if you understand a person, it's a lot easier to predict their behavior. And I think that Trump does not understand Putin. And Trump tries to equate himself with a certain kind of the strong man kind of vibe. He's not really that man, but Putin is. And so I think that the EU has a historical model in Hitler or Mussolini that's fresh in their minds in ways that it's not within the United States. So they have, and they've also seen the Soviet Union, and that's impacted the ways in which people process information. There's a completely different frame of reference for the EU that does not exist in the United States. So I think that they're much more conscious of the risks associated with Putin and his strategies, and they're able to kind of mitigate that in ways that we're not doing right this second. So I think to some degree, NATO is becoming stronger and the United States is becoming weaker, which I know is completely contrary to what common sense would tell us, but that's the way it seems to me.
And just one other thought, that I think NATO as an organization, which I mentioned here, I think there's a reason that Mark Rutte is now the head of NATO. He was called the Trump whisperer. That because Trump is flattered, and he's flattery and favor. That was what Kamala Harris always said in her things. But Putin's very good at that with Trump, and but Mark Rutte knows how to see through all that. So anyway,
Can we look at his chart and NATO
wait,
next? Is that okay?
wait, what,
Because he's
yeah,
sort
Yeah,
of the
yeah, that'll be
mouthpiece.
cool.
He's sort of the mouthpiece or the public face
he
of
is
NATO at this point. And we'll just
absolutely.
remind people that he was what, the prime minister of the Netherlands for more than a decade, 14, 16 years, overlapping with the Trump administration. And Dutch intelligence actually saw the Russian hacker group Cozy Bear getting into US systems. And that's an important piece of info, I think.
Oh, I think so. And his moon is on the north node of NATO. It's forming this kind of mini grand trine here. I'll let you talk about other things.
No, go ahead.
I'm just gonna start, looking at aspects that I see. This is air and fire, and this is kind of like Aries moons are so determined and see things very clearly and know what they want. And he's an Aquarius sun and a Gemini moon, conjunct pretty much Uranus. And this is forming a mini grand trine to the north node of NATO. He kind of can see all the patterns, is kind of how I would describe that. He's been looking at this for a long time, and he can connect all the dots.
May I correct one thing? The moon Uranus conjunction is in NATO's chart.
I know, but his moon is still
Oh,
aspecting
I
it.
know I said that, but I think
Oh, sorry.
I heard
Oh,
that you
sorry.
said
Yeah.
it was his, right? So
Oh,
just so people don't get confused by that, but his emotional driver furthers everything NATO is about. He has an ability to see the big picture with that Aquarius sun and be part of a collective and to be a bit detached. But the Aries moon, particularly on top of NATO's North Node, its mission is, I think I said this last time, I'll kick your teeth in. I mean, there's just not even any question. There's a fearlessness, and that's a
yeah.
fighter moon. That is a fighter moon.
Yeah. And to go back to what Andy said about, alliances and NATO and things, Gemini is very much about alliances and things and kind of bringing new people in to NATO because it's the NATO moon, as Kasich said. You have to bear with me, everybody. Mercury is retrograding on all
Oh,
my stuff. So if I say a word wrong, then, it's like, anyway.
we're all doing it.
And I told you that Ceres, I had to bring Ceres back in because Ceres I see as really important since she was um, promoted to a dwarf planet equal with Pluto. She has been really active in a lot of things, and this is saying, we Ceres is complex, of course, but she's about grief, loss, forgiveness, but also bringing in healing. She's about meeting needs of the people of NATO.
Mhm.
In Gemini, I think he's a really healing force for NATO to kind of redefine itself a bit, as Andy was saying, and step up and really kind of defend the West, democracy, whatever you want to call it. All these words, everything.
How do you two see the the conjunction of Venus, Ceres, and Pluto at zero Aquarius, excuse me, impacting his zero Scorpio Mars in the second
Yeehaw.
there? I mean,
Yeehaw.
what, Kathy?
Mars rules his
What do you?
moon. This man is going to act. He will do things. He may do them behind the scenes.
Yeah.
They might be surgical strikes. But there's a fearlessness, and since that rules his moon, I'm doing this. I'm just going to, and it's for the greater good, and it's for people, and it's dealing with maybe a hidden enemy. All that Scorpio, that Pluto, and the Plutonian aspect of things always makes me think of Russia and Putin. Always.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
was really curious what your takes would be on that, because to me that seems like that has to be significant. I mean, that's like something's grinding there. What does that lead? What action comes out of that? And I'm curious what you two think about that.
Well,
Least force.
yeah, and kind of to go back, I know I always take a bit more woo approach on this, but to go back to, Mercury stationing
Why I
direct
love you, by the way.
on Chiron in Sagittarius. So it feels like what's happening in the world now has kind of opened up some wounds in NATO about how they've acted and how they haven't acted and how they have not stood up against what's been clearly happening for a long time. But he's only been in since October. And so, I would say that triple conjunction of Venus and Ceres and Pluto at 0 Aquarius tomorrow, it square his Mars, is just, he's the right person for this moment to really kind of step up and kind of bring NATO together again, as Andy said, probably bring more people into it, possibly Ukraine, as Kathy said, and really be driven to defend against what's been happening. So yeah,
That triple conjunction is in the house of allies and open enemies.
it is. Yeah, goes
I
right.
think
Just
something,
that Jupiter again, so it's still in conjunction really with that Jupiter too. So
my money is on some surgical strike from NATO coming in the next week. Honestly, I really think they're going to do something that Russia wouldn't believe they would do, and they'll do it, and it'll be a what moment.
yeah, and when Kathy says surgical strike, it doesn't necessarily mean bombs or something. It could be a
Yeah, this could be an intelligence act or all sorts of things, financial act, lots of things
these
could happen.
these can show up in quite a few ways. Venus is related to financial things too. So it's hard to say exactly how. So before anybody thinks, oh, NATO's just going to go in and drop the bomb, I don't know if it's going to be that. Although Pluto is plutonium, so I kind of think he's a bit more strategic than that, shall we say? Do you think so, Kathy? Looking at
Oh, right. But I will not be surprised if there isn't some very quick bombing strike. I will not, if missiles suddenly get launched, because Russia has been triple dog daring NATO countries. They've been going, we're putting our toe across the line, we're putting our toe across the line, putting our toe across the line.
Oh,
That toe is going to get cut off
yeah.
somehow.
Which is going to be really interesting for the United States, who has a strategic alliance with NATO. So if there's an act of aggression here, what is that going to do to the United States? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it makes for some interesting, speculation. There's a lot that could happen. And another thing that jumps out to me, the past life part of me, is that look at Rutte's South Node and look at Putin. What do you see?
Yep.
Kathy, what do you see?
Huh? What do I see? It's on his
Tell
Venus.
people where.
It's
Yeah.
on
Yes, his Venus.
Mhm.
Venus on his South Node.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got
So
history. They've got
they got history, and they basically dated the same girl in 8th grade, and now they're annoyed with each other. And that's a simplistic way to put it, but there is a contentiousness here, in my opinion. And I think that contentiousness, based on the positions that they hold, could have an impact on the ways they see each other and the ways in which they trust each other. So to say that they don't trust each other, I think is an understatement. And that the idea that Trump does trust Putin, crazy as that sounds, I think he does. And the fact that the head of NATO does not is going to also make for some interesting dynamics in the ways that just what Kathy's talking about, these lightning types of strikes, there's a lot to be said for, hitting them first. So if Rutte really has a history of Putin's type, just like what Kamala said, I know Trump's type. Rutte knows Putin's type. And that dynamic is likely to play out in the ways in which they organize themselves strategically, especially with the United States being so totally up in the air. NATO has to take proactive action to protect themselves. And we don't have a frame of reference for what that looks like, because we've always seen them as sort of a satellite of the United States. Well, that's not happening now. That's why the dynamics of what's going on here is so tremendously interesting, because we don't have an easy frame of reference upon which, to anchor our expectations. That's why I think that the old ways of looking at it are being shaken up. And but yeah, there's a trust factor here that's not supportive. And I think that South Node Venus conjunction really speaks to that, in my opinion.
That's between, just to clarify for listeners, that's Rutte's
Rutte and
South
Putin.
Node and Putin's Venus. So do you want to look at the US chart with NATO now? And because we've covered a lot.
Do we want to quickly look at Musk's, or you want to hold that off?
No, can look at
and
that.
Then, yeah, just we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this, but there's some very, very interesting things. NATO's moon and Uranus are on Musk's Venus, which is his money planet and values. That's a kind of a destabilizing influence. NATO's Pluto is on his south node. Do you like that, Andy? So NATO has his number.
Yeah,
it may not
NATO.
seem like it, but NATO's the bigger, so he has more money than anybody in the world. NATO's got that. And NATO's
nodes are on his midheaven and IC. So that's his public face and his basis of security and safety and other things. It's a very important angle, of course. You're right, NATO has his number.
and his Chiron is right smack in the middle of that cluster of all of the NATO Aries planets, and that is where there's going to be a solar eclipse in March. I wouldn't want to be him for the next few. And Mars in his Mars retrograding back to 17 degrees. Oh no, sorry, ignore.
Yeah, I did want to say it does sound like he's starting to panic a little bit, because in response to the killing of that United Healthcare CEO, he's kind of put out this really long tweet, or whatever you call it, on X, kind of saying, CEOs, the world would not be able to function without CEOs, blah, 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 blah. Without generating profits for shareholders. He's like going, America will be destitute without us. That's what he said.
Anyone who's worked in corporate America knows that things happen despite what's going on at the top. That's where the work does not happen at the top. Sorry.
Exactly. Anyway, that was just a quick aside that he had sent that out as well. Yeah, his chart is well lit up, and I agree with Kathy. I would not want to be him at the moment. Yeah.
He's got all this stuff in the 12th. I mean, this is Sigmund Freud on speed dial here. This is a man that has low self-esteem. It ties into Trump. He has low self-esteem. He's trying to assert his dominance, which he doesn't feel. He's just like we've got, a nodal connection to Venus with Rutte to Putin. Just like you said, Putin, a north node is conjuncting Musk Mars, so he's definitely the alpha dog, Putin, that is, in this. And what really jumps out to me is how many things are being triggered by 13 and 14 degrees in the cardinal planets. Aries, Cancer, and Libra. And if we see anything, because they all have significant inner aspects right on those degrees. And so anything that's triggering those degrees is going to have a cascading effect, a domino effect on all of these people in different ways. I think Musk is over his head. emotionally. He may not be over his head intellectually, but I think he is over his head emotionally. And he's got a stacked 12th house, but not a stacked 12th house, in my opinion, in a positive way. I think, and does he have Mercury parked exactly on the ascendant? Is that what's going on here?
Yep, and it's also on the U.S. Sun.
Sun. Whoa. So
Yeah.
so he's trying to be a badass, but I just don't think he is, because I think his traditional short man's disease is nipping at his heels. It's going to get. I would say that the probability, in my opinion, of Musk sort of losing it has got to be pretty high. So we'll
There's one
see.
good thing I want to point out. Nato's Moon Uranus conjunction is in his 12th house. I've already mentioned it's hovering around his Venus, but this is going on outside of what he can see. There's behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
There's behind the scenes stuff going after his money deals, Venus in Gemini.
Yeah. There's so much we could say about that. I would say, the moon, he's moon guided because he's got a Cancer ascendant, and his mother has been like fueling him and pushing him that whole time. This guy's like trying to please his mother, I think, in many ways, but that's a kind of an aside. And apparently, or allegedly, because this is for entertainment purposes only, he is coping with all this by snorting loads of ketamine, which is very 12th house too. So,
All right, let's look at NATO in
allegedly,
the US.
yes. All right, so dive in. So I've put the US chart on the inside. So that brings us to a 12-degree Sagittarius ascendant, which the Mercury Sun conjunction yesterday was right pretty close to that, 2 degrees away. So anyway.
So the Moon Uranus conjunction is on the US. Mars, they help attacks on our country. They're part of it.
Yep.
I mean, not that they make it happen, but that's a key thing. And our country puts its attacking energy behind whatever stuff is going on.
They're in an alliance. Like you said, Gemini is in an alliance. So yeah, definitely.
We've already mentioned that the US Saturn in Libra is conjunct NATO's Neptune in Libra. And I would think initially, and then it also pulls into the big cluster of Aries planets that NATO has. And I would think that initially from this, the US was like a beacon. It had this like spiritual, mystical, overlooming, oh, this is the model. Maybe not so much anymore.
Didn't quite live
I
up.
agree with that 100%. And I think that is a critical piece of what's going on. In the night after World War II, when Europe was in such a disarray, and they came in with the Marshall Plan, and they came in and tried to get things going, the United States was the king of the hill. And they have, in some sense, I still think the United States is in an identity crisis, and that is not to the United States' advantage on the world stage. So I agree 100% with what Kathy just said. And I think it goes back to the difference between the United States' preeminence as a military and industrial power after World War II and who the hell are they today? And people in the EU are confused. I mean, they want the United States to be powerful, but the United States is a hot mess. And, not everybody's a MAGA boy. People have a way of looking at what's happening and have to be questioning the legitimacy of the United States, the viability of the United States as a serious player. So yeah, Kathy, I agree completely with your assessment. It is dead on, for sure.
And the aspects that we've seen that activate this Libra Aries axis, of course, we've had all the eclipses because the transiting nodes are in Aries and Libra. And we've got that other one coming up that Kathy mentioned in March. This is moving NATO to the 4th house, which is more defending the defender role, whereas really, as you said, US has since really, or since the war, been kind of saying we saved Europe, kind of.
For
Maybe
sure.
Europe saves
Absolutely.
us now. Maybe Europe saves us.
Yeah, yeah. And Jupiter, of
Excuse me.
course, where all this is happening today with Venus and Ceres at that 29th degree, then joining Pluto, has been affecting the US Pluto return. There's a lot going on. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The US is having an identity crisis. And I have to say, thankfully, I'm glad we have who we still have at the helm right now. I think
Excuse me.
he's experienced enough to realize that we have to count on our allies and not come all bombastic and go, you know.
I'd like to point out one thing we talked about being activated in the NATO chart by itself, and that's this grand trine in fire that's going to be really tight at the December 15th full moon. NATO's Chiron there at 8 degrees Sagittarius will be trining retrograde Mars stationing on the US North Node, which is our way to the future, in our 8th house of shared resources, and trining that NATO's Mercury in Aries. So there will be something that happens as a result of whatever NATO does around the 15th that is going to have an impact on what the US's future is. And it's the 8th house of secrets and crimes. And so if there's intel about something that we need to know about, NATO may have it. It doesn't mean that we as humans out in the public will hear it, but that's shared resources.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And one of my long-standing predictions has been that intelligence would come out of the EU sometime between November 5th and January 20th that would circle back in a negative way against financial dealings behind the scenes that may have impacted the election in ways that were not completely legal, ethical, or non-fattening. And I think that that is tied into this, in my opinion. It would not surprise me. And this also relates to the election, I think, in Romania. You know, where that information from what's going on and why Romania has made this decision, the players are the same players.
Yeah.
The money goes back to the same basic, source. And so all those things could circle back. And even though we may not see it overtly on December the 15th, that information is shared and that initiates an investigatory process, especially related to the United States military, then a lot of things, and it could also go back to something we've talked about a lot, the three of us, that the timeline for the inauguration may still be pushed back, and that pushback does not favor the aspects and transits to Trump's chart, which kick in so much in March and April. So there's a lot that still can happen.
The lawyer in me wants to address what Andy just said. People are going to say, but the law is bam, bam, bam. And I would put to you, has anything that this one candidate done fit norms? Why would it not make sense that those norms would get blasted as well?
Yeah.
And there are existing laws about espionage. There are existing laws about selling government secrets or influence to foreign entities, the Logan Act and all sorts of things. It's not like we have to recreate these laws out of thin air. They already exist. They're just not being applied to Trump because of some Department of Justice, memo that says that he's immune to all this. If we actually apply the law as it's currently written, then none of this would be happening anyway.
He's not immune yet. He's not immune yet.
So as I think I've said in our conversation before, all these comments saying the inauguration's always on January the 20th. Actually,
that's not true. Go back to Florida. Go back to Bush Gore.
Well, it used to be in March, actually, way many years ago. But anyway, even during war, it's been on January the 20th. And I was like, so, but what if the person we're at war with is the president-elect? That changes everything, right? So, yeah, just to kind of reiterate what you're saying. Yeah.
So
So,
be of good cheer, everybody.
yeah.
The
And
reason predicting the future is this interesting kind of dynamic is that you cannot use existing norms as an absolute barometer for what's going to happen. I'm going to go back to when I predicted the housing crash. And I said, if this was Argentina, not to disparage Argentina, or this is someplace else, we looked at all these factors, it would be neon obvious that the housing market is going to crash within the next couple of years. But we subvert sort of the laws of economics and the laws of physics and the historical precedent because we give primacy to the United States that may not be deserved.
Yep.
So part of making a prediction is to try to understand variables that don't seem to fit in the norm. And part of really making a psychic prediction is knowing what not to look at. We are sold on a frame of reference, a cognitive anchor that tells us, look there, and that's the answer. But when we're being pointed to look that that's the answer, that is probably trying to keep us from seeing the real root cause, which is where the true answer is going to lie. I still maintain that we're being kind of snowballed here, gaslit straight from jump, and that there are a lot of things that are yet to play out. And so just because things have been done a certain way in the past does not mean that they're going to be that way in the future, which is why we all have jobs, I guess, to some degree. So you have to look around it. You have to see the way in which an entity inhabits space. The space around it has an influencing, mitigating, energetic input. And the dynamic is just something we're being sold. That does not make it the truth.
Yep.
For sure.
So I think we've gone long enough for today. You know, I know people are enjoying these. You know, my closing thing, and I'll let Kathy and Andy both give a little closing, is again, don't forget your self-care. Please do not project. You know, if you hear words like surgical strike and you go, oh my God, we're all going to be nuked, that it could happen a million ways, like a drone surgical strike or something like that. So we don't know exactly how. So there's no point in kind of, you know, getting stuck in that thing. And all we can do right now is, as collective, is really take care of ourselves, take care of our families, take care of those you love. And I'm sure Kathy will reiterate her usual message too. So
Well, and expanding on what Louise has said, look for the joy. This is the holiday season. Look for the joy. Spend time with people who make you forget that there's a world outside there. Pull your focus down to today. Today, I have food. I have a roof. I have friends around me. I'm going to go do something fun. Please go do fun things. Please, it's not frivolous. It's actually building an atmosphere of solidarity and hope, believe it or not, which could
it
end
is.
up being extraordinarily powerful.
Yep. Andy, any
Yeah,
last?
there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of good things happening. I mean, we look at political influence like AOC and different people, the Green New Deal. There are a lot of things that are still happening behind the scenes. I still maintain that women save us, and it's important that we support women. And part of the whole dynamic of MAGA is to suppress women because they fear women. And I think that women are going to rise up as they should. And I believe that that's going to have a big impact, a revolutionary impact. My belief of women's re-empowerment as being the thing that saves us is consistent. I hang on to that. I hope for that. I want that. I just want everybody to try to find the unicornia part of their life, just as Kathy and Louise are saying.
Yeah.
Things are not as bleak as they may appear. Now there's some stuff, but there is still things that we can do, and we're not just going to roll over and play dead, baby. It's on. There are a lot of things that we can do, and when things start to go a little bit sideways, Musk and Trump, these boys are going to be nervous Nellies, and I want them to be even more nervous. So don't give up. Keep fighting. Keep smiling. Santa keeps a list, but you may still get a present anyway. It's all going to be good. Don't worry. That's my speech.
It will.
So hi.
All right. So we'll see you all next time, everybody. Peace out.
Happy December, everybody. We'll see you soon.